Still figuring out life? Good. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. I'm Mary Choi Kelly, PhD, mom, leadership coach, and C-suite veteran with 30 years of helping leaders thrive. On this podcast, Fresh Out and Figuring It Out, we give young adults the mic so they can share their stories and everyone listening can understand who they truly are and what's on their minds. We're also showing the real side of young men, one that defies stereotypes, so that we can rewrite the story together and help every young adult, both men and women, grow into confident, compassionate leaders who know their worth and lead with heart. Follow the show. We're figuring it out together, one story at a time. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fresh Out and Figuring It Out. Today's guest is David Kurtz, and we will get into an introduction, but before we do that, we start every episode with a would you rather question because life is all about choices. So I have a question for you, David. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Would you rather never have to pay for coffee again or never have to pay for gas again?
Gas or coffee? I think, it would definitely be no longer pay for gas. I do a lot of driving. I'm currently in Orange County, and I do a good amount of driving in between Orange County to LA and Orange County to San Diego, which can get especially expensive right now. And I've learned to drink coffee black, so it's a little bit cheaper. So I would save a lot of money with gas.
There you go. Very practical answer. And yes, having lived in Southern California for most of my life, the traffic and the drive times have just, I think, doubled over the last 10 years, unfortunately.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially in San Diego, I feel like growing up, it wasn't as bad as it currently is.
Yeah, it is a beautiful place to live. And I think some of that just comes with the territory, right? You got to take the good with the bad. So, David Kurtz, thank you so much for joining. When I was thinking about these episodes and really giving people a better perspective on what different careers might look like, I reached out to a former high school friend of mine, which is the firm that you work at today. And so you are an attorney, and I know that we will hear a lot more about that today. But before I do that, I just wanted to emphasize again for those that are listening, your relationships and the people that you meet early in your life, you never know where you may run into them again, where you might have something in common or can reach out to them. Like I said, I've met David through a friend of mine from high school. So that is nearly 40 years ago. And it is so great that through social media, and there's a lot of things that I don't like about social media, but the thing that I personally enjoy is being able to stay connected with people and to be able to reach out and make relationships, continue to have friendships, nurture new ones, etc. And so I just encourage all the listeners and especially young people to think about the importance and value of relationships because you never know when your relationships are going to really help you in your life. And I'm sure, David, you have had similar experiences like that as well. But I really, really am grateful that Cy put us together and that we were able to connect for this podcast.
Me too. Shout out Cy Everett.
That's right. So tell us a little bit about yourself and, what you do and how you got there.
Sure, I alluded to it earlier. Grew up in San Diego. Growing up, I worked at a boat rental and got my captain's license. So my interests usually lie around the water, going boating, going to the beach. I did my undergrad at UCLA and got involved in the athletics department. I started working my freshman year with student recruiting, assisting recruit high school athletes to come to the UCLA athletics department. Most of it was all Olympic sports, or basically anything besides men's football and men's basketball. And then it came into about my senior year. I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career. And I kind of looked around and found that my boss at the athletics department was an attorney, because a lot of what we dealt with was compliance and the compliance around recruiting student athletes. So I'm like, this is something I like, something that I'm good at. So it led to my pursuit of um, a JD to become a lawyer. Then I went to Chapman Law in the city of Orange, and that's what brought me here today.
So let's go back a little bit because you covered a lot of ground. You started to work with boats and that you got a captain's license. That was all before high school or during high school. Is that right?
Yeah, during high school. So I think it started when I was about 16 years old. And then it was my summer job for most of my time in college.
What does
So,
it take to get a captain's license? Because it's one thing to kind
so
of enjoy boating, right? I mean, I think everyone that lives near the water loves to do things on and around the water, but that's a pretty big commitment, it sounds like.
yeah. So what a captain's license can get you is to be able to take people on a boat for hire. So I had the lowest license, which is an OUPV 6-pack. I could drive people on uninspected vessels. Um, you needed, I can't even remember how many days. You have to log a certain amount of days on the water, and then you have to take about a 2-week, it's either 10 days or 2-week course to be able to get your captain's license. And you had to do it and I did it when I turned 18.
Okay, so did you do that because you were looking to be a captain for hire or just because?
A little bit of both. I think I wanted to keep my options open. Working at the boat rental, there was a lot of opportunities to be a boat captain, and I saw different people take a captain's license into a lot of different directions, from anywhere working in the Coast Guard to being like a fisherman captain. And then so I was thinking maybe that's something I could pursue. But all of a sudden, it was fun and good money.
Hey, have you used your license and have you taken people out or what's your current captain status?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd still like to be called captain, but my actual license, unfortunately, has expired. I'm actually not sure what the requirements are to continue your license, but I didn't do whatever the requirements were. So for those 5-year period, though, mainly what I would do is, take people on boats, but a lot of what I do is sunset sails. So I'd work at the boat rental I worked at during the day, and then take people on a sailboat for 2 hours after that.
All right. Well, that sounds like a great little gig there.
Yeah.
And then, working in the athletics department, what drew you to that job? And tell me a little more about that because it seems like a lot of responsibility to be doing that in college.
Yeah, so I brought it up more of what you were saying, just how important connections are. So the way I got the job, or at least I should say the way I got the interview, was one of my sister's friends who attended UCLA, who was a senior when I was an incoming freshman, was on the rowing team. And she ended up getting a job in the athletics department assisting with student recruiting. So, I talked to her about, what it's like at UCLA. And she's like, "Oh, I work in the athletics department. I can ask my boss if we're hiring and if you would want to have an interview." So I'm like, "Of course, that sounds amazing. I'm a huge sports fan. I get paid, and it's a good way to start meeting people right away." So at UCLA, and I'm sure this is at most schools, you have an orientation in the summer before school starts. So during that orientation, I actually did my interview, got the job, and then my first day was we worked a lot of on game day events. So our first football game day was in August before school started. So my first day on the job was actually before I started my freshman year.
I'm really glad that you emphasized and told the story about how you got that job in college because when I have conversations with young adults, a lot of times I think they don't really know a lot of people. Who do I know? Who do I reach out to? And I always stress that you actually know a lot more people than you think you do because it's not only the people you know, right? It's the people that they know. So in your case, it was your sister who had a friend, or to start with your parents and their friends, or your previous coaches or mentors or neighbors. When you start making the list, it's not only the people you know, it is then talking to them about people that they know, which completely changes the landscape and the game in terms of the networking and how you can build relationships. And like I said earlier, I think social media is great. LinkedIn is great. However, going out and making 500, 1,000, 5,000 connections on LinkedIn, those aren't real connections, right? It's one thing to make a connection on LinkedIn. It's another thing to have a real genuine connection and a conversation with somebody and for them to really know you, to get to know you in terms of who you are, your work ethic, your character, but also what your interests are so that they can really start thinking about, well, who do I know that can really help you? And how do you continue to maintain and nurture those relationships? Because for me personally, if someone that I actually know reaches out, I will take that phone call any day of the week, right? And I'm sure you do also. But if people reach out on LinkedIn, unless I really know them, there's just too many messages that come through, just like every social media platform, right? There's too much noise out there. So to be able to decipher who you really know and who you're really going to respond to is really difficult unless you have that personal connection. So I don't know if you have something to add on that.
I agree. I try to use social media as a means of bolstering in-person interactions. It's nice to see my family and my friends doing fun things, and it lets me keep up with them, but it makes it easier the next time I see them so that I can know what they're doing in their life so you're not at square one. But I definitely am not a big fan of any social media as well.
Right. Or relying on that for all of your connections.
Yeah.
So great. So you're in college, you've got this job, which is wonderful. You're learning a ton. And what were you actually studying when you were
I
in
studied
college?
economics. So I
Okay.
was in economics. I really thought that I was going to go into accounting. That was what just felt like the natural next step for me. UCLA doesn't have an undergrad business school, so the closest thing is economics. And a lot of people, at least my friends, were going from an economics degree going into one of the big four accounting firms. So that's kind of what I just thought I would do. And then I started doing the accounting classes, and I didn't really like that. So I really felt that I had to pivot. And I mean, it was really nice that I had a boss that was an attorney, and that it was nice that I liked what I did. So it really helped me figure out what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of figuring out what you want to do is eliminating what you don't like doing, right? Which helps to kind of narrow things down, even if you don't know the whole field, but to say, okay, what I know I don't like is doing work independently or doing a lot of work on spreadsheets or having to present or whatever it might be, right? So the more you can hone in on things that you don't like or that you're not good at, right? Because if you're not really good at it, even if you really like it, it may not be the right path. Not to say that you can't get better. However, there's so many things that everyone is really good at, right? Everyone has strengths and gifts. So leaning into those strengths and gifts and then thinking about how can I really leverage that and use it to my fullest potential, that's usually a good place to start.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with that
mhm,
definitely. It's hard to do something for a long time that you're not good at. So sometimes you have to pivot, even though you love it. If you are not good at it, you're not going to love it forever.
right. And when you start getting into it, and if you start building a career in it, it's probably going to get harder, quite honestly, right? Because the work will get more challenging. And it might be where you say, hey, I love it. And that's going to be a hobby, or that's going to be something I do in my free time to keep my interests, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a career. I think that there is so much pressure that is put on picking the right degree. And oftentimes, that degree may not lead you to the job or the career that you have. And that's okay. So when you look back at what you studied, what did you enjoy about that? And do you reflect back on what that experience was? And maybe if there's anything that you would have done differently or a message that you would send to, people that are looking at college today or in the middle of their degree now and questioning, am I doing the right thing? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, You can use any degree you get to your advantage. There's a way that you can spin everything. So, economics wasn't exactly relevant to what I'm doing today, but of course I have no regrets about it. I really liked the classes that I have. And the reason I didn't continue with economics, not because I didn't like numbers. I actually loved numbers. So I really liked what I got to learn and their impact on how you see the world. I will say it's helpful to know what you want to do going forward. So because economics was a little bit more of a difficult major, that maybe I would have done something differently had I known I wanted to go to law school right when I started at UCLA. But it's okay if you don't know what you want to do.
Right.
Because even though I could have maybe chosen an easier major, I still really enjoyed doing the economics and
Yeah.
what I got out of that.
Well, maybe you could explain what an economics major is, because both my kids are studying economics. So if you had to tell somebody that was, just entering college, what would you tell them? What is the major about?
Yeah, so I would say economics was put simply as, the economics 101 is the idea of supply and demand. So that's what you learn in Econ 101 is that the higher of supply something is, the cheaper it's going to be versus the more demand of something, the more expensive it's going to be. So what I didn't realize in economics, there's so much coding that's involved in it that I actually didn't realize. But a lot of it is putting numbers to the way that people buy and sell things to get an understanding of why things cost the way they do and the way to influence business.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that can actually be really relevant for a lot of different things. All right, so let's go further now in terms of you got your degree, you had a great mentor, it seems, through your boss, would you say?
Yeah. So it was nice. I had a couple of bosses. So I had one person that was directly in charge, one person more in charge of compliance. And then there ended up being a couple of student or graduate student athletes that were also my boss. So I had a lot of different people that I could pull inspiration from and could ask questions to. So I think a lot of what I got from that job is not being afraid to ask questions, because being able to ask questions and having comfort with somebody is really helpful to being successful at that job.
Absolutely. I think that is a really, really great takeaway that a lot of times we feel that we need to have all the answers. And that happens not only when you are new to your role, it actually happens even as you are promoted up. Right. Because you think, okay, now I've been promoted or I'm in a leadership role. And of course, people are looking at me for the answers. And it's actually, in some ways, the opposite, that the most vulnerable and open people and humble people that recognize they don't have the answers, but have the ability to ask the right questions to get the answers or to be resourceful or connected to find people to help solve the problems is really what's more valuable.
I would definitely agree. And I think one of the biggest learning curves that I had, even now, but right out of law school into my first job, was knowing when to ask questions versus knowing when to go and look for the answer on my own, which really
So,
turns into a skill.
yeah, so let's talk more about that. Was there a little bit of a checklist or a process that you kind of ran through in your head to say, all right, here are some questions that I feel like I need to go solve, or here's a question that I really need to go seek help or advice?
So unfortunately, a lot of it was just trial and error. So a lot of it was, I had what I thought was a really simple question given to be one of my bosses, and I would be spending hours researching it because I thought that this was something I needed to know, and so I couldn't go back to them because I'd look silly asking such a simple question. So there was a lot of times where that happened, and then slowly I would just go back to my boss. I would do the research, couldn't find the answer, and would ask them. And then, that took 5 minutes. So it was a lot of that, of trying to do my own research, trying to find the answer when I couldn't find it, going back to my boss. The more I did it, I was better at figuring out which questions were ones that I could find out and ones that it would just be easier to ask one of my bosses.
Sure. And life is really about trial and error. I mean, you do have to sort of figure out, because that boss may have had a different threshold than a different boss, right? So you do have to kind of test it out. And maybe unconsciously, you had created a bit of a methodology in your head to say, okay, I'm going to work on this for a day. I'm not going to let it go a week, right? Before I ask for help, because there are deadlines and there are timelines. And so just trying to start first with what you know, how you would solve the problem, and then reach out and ask for help. So I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So you said that what you were doing in the athletics department, there was a lot of work in compliance. And so that led you to exploring, what is it that a lawyer does when you learned that your manager was an attorney, et cetera. But what about the work, I guess, interested you or intrigued you to even think about that?
So I guess the landscape of college sports has changed so much. It's so funny to see what it is now versus when I was in college. But the NCAA comes out with such a long list and very strict rules of how a university can communicate with athletes. So what I really liked about it is, a lot of it was helping my boss just read the compliance rules to try to figure out how we can get an advantage by recruiting athletes within the scope of the rules. So it was, a challenge and a puzzle to be able to get a competitive advantage while working within the scope of the rules.
So it sounds like what really stimulated you was solving the problem. So you
Yeah.
have a problem, right? Like it's a complex problem. It's not an easy problem. And you have to figure out how to come up with a creative solution.
Yeah. So I guess that's the base of it. I like the idea of being able to use, I guess to be creative, to have this rule book, and you can call it a solution, but to be able to bring in more athletes, to bring in to have that be the solution, I thought was really exciting.
Yeah. All right. Great. So, so you are intrigued by that. You have some people that will support you. You decide to pursue law school, and tell me more about that process.
Yeah, so I found out, I get, not super late into the process because everybody finds out they want, or, being a lawyer, there's different timings and different paths that a lot of people do. So, some people go into undergrad knowing that they want to be a lawyer, while as other people, become a lawyer 10 years down the road. So I'd say, my experience of deciding either junior or senior year was pretty normal, but I took the LSAT, was okay with my score, obviously applied to a bunch of schools. And what was more important to me, I would say, than getting into the most prestigious school was having the least amount of debt possible. So I applied to some of the bigger schools, but ended up getting into Chapman University. And I ended up getting into a university in San Diego. And I struggled to decide which school I wanted to go to. So my biggest priority really was, to try to take as least amount of student debt in as possible. And so that would have been going to the school in San Diego. But I had a little bit of a mental struggle there because going back to San Diego from LA, it felt a little bit like I would be regressing. I probably would have gone and lived at home. And not saying I don't love my friends, but I probably would have hung out with the same group of people I did. There's a lot of people I know stayed in San Diego after high school and after college because it's such a great place. So I really struggled between whether I wanted to go in San Diego or go to Chapman in Orange County and take on a little bit of student debt. I ended up choosing Chapman, and I'm very, very happy with my decision. I've made a life here, and I did take on just a little bit of student debt that's been very manageable, and it really helped me grow, I would say, socially and then in my career.
Yeah. So, where did you get that kind of, I guess, wisdom or insight to say, I'm going to take a path that might be a more difficult path? Because that's not often a natural reaction, right? I think as human beings, we're somewhat inclined to take an easier path, or many people are, to say, hey, this is an easier path. I can go home, I can live at home, I can have home cooked meals, I can have my laundry done, I can just study. I know you said that it was because you wanted to stretch and grow. What really kind of gave you that inspiration, I guess, to do that?
Yeah, I would say it was nice having very supportive friends and family along the way that I relied on, that I had my parents there that were saying, we're going to support you if you go and live with us in San Diego, or we'll support you if you go to Orange County. So that's definitely number one. And then I just saw some people that I went to high school with that, it was easy to get stuck in a rut and do the same thing over and over again because you grew up and stayed where you went to high school. So, I wouldn't say that it wouldn't have been a good life, but I think I wanted more life experiences. And I had the support of my family to be able to push me to do what I thought was best for me.
Yeah, no, I think the concept of getting life experience early is really, really important. When I was in college, I went to UC Irvine. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. And one of the professors I worked with asked me, Mary, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I said, well, I'm going to go get a PhD in organizational psychology. And he actually looked at me and said, well, that's a really bad idea.
Mhm.
Do you know what psychology is about? It's about life experience, and you don't have any. So you should really go get some life experience first and then go get a graduate degree. Now, I thought, okay, that's interesting. And I valued his feedback. I still went and got my PhD right away, but it always stuck with me, even though I didn't necessarily do what he said. But I did recognize that, yes, I'm really young. I don't know anything about life. And in my graduate program, which was very applied, which is why I took that path, I was sitting in a room with people that had already worked in big corporate jobs for 4, 5, 10 years, and I had no experience. So I was reading Time Magazine, I was reading Fortune Magazine, I was reading business books. And not to say that that's the same, but at least it was giving me some perspective. It was giving me the language. It was giving me an understanding of the types of issues that people deal with in the corporate world that I was completely unfamiliar with. So the life experience, I think, is so valuable. And I tell my kids all the time the same thing, that, who doesn't want to live in Southern California? Who doesn't want to live at the beach and surf every day? I tell them all the time, there's a big world out there. Like, go explore, do it when you're young. I mean, you can do it anytime, and any chance that you have is great. However, doing it when you're young is really a gift and a luxury, right? I lived in Europe for a year when I was in my mid 20s, and I was working for a big company. And so my job took me to Europe. And so I lived there and traveled and got to see not only how different cultures really are, but also just appreciate the different mindset in terms of how people look at how work fits into their life, because there are very different, as you can imagine and probably know, right? The mentality of taking a whole month off in the summer is the standard in Europe. And in the US, we can barely get, a week off, right? To be able to go on vacation for a week with your family, and you're feeling like that is a huge accomplishment. And we all know that it takes a week to really unplug, right? To really get relaxed and into the groove. And before you know it, it's time to go back to work. So I think that it's just eye-opening to see the differences in not only the cultures, but the mindset and how people really live.
Yeah, I that sparked a memory for me too. So I was lucky enough. I traveled. I've traveled. I'd like to think a good amount, but during college, I did a summer abroad in London at the London School of Economics, and just the life experiences that I lived there, I take with me every day. And something that there's something that has really helped me also throughout my career now is something that I learned there, and it was a little anecdote that I went with one of my friends. We were studying in our dorm room, and we're like, all right, let's go and get. So I guess let me back up. We had been walking around the city all day. We'd passed by a million coffee shops, and eventually, we were at the British Museum. We're like, all right, let's go to another coffee shop and let's start studying. And we just kind of were mindlessly walking around trying to find a coffee shop and couldn't find one. And so we're like, all right, let's go put in one on our phones that we know where it is. We'll walk that way. And then once we put it in, we started finding a million coffee shops. So what it kind of taught me was having a destination is so important in life, that if you just are mindlessly walking around, you're never going to find anything. But when we finally put in the coffee shop, we ended up finding a million more on the way. So it taught me it's so important to have a destination, but it's okay to move off from that destination on your way there.
Right. How you get there may be a windy road, but to have some idea of where you're going. Absolutely. Yeah. That's awesome. So you make the decision, you're going to Chapman University. What is law school like? What would you say? So, again, it's good to say that, hey, I want to be an attorney. And I think there's a lot of, being an attorney or a doctor, I think those are professions that there's a lot of preconceived notions of what that really is, right? Like, I'm going to dress up in a suit and go to trial and go into court every day. Well, that may not be the case. For most people that are attorneys, that isn't the case at all. So what was law school like?
So law school, I will say, is a lot of reading. So I do caution anybody that is deciding whether they want to be a lawyer to know that law school is a lot of work and it is a lot of reading. So a lot of at least your first year classes use the Socratic method, where you read a bunch of different cases and then you go to class and the professor will call on you randomly to ask you questions about the actual case that you read. And a lot of what you're doing is there's a lot of the time there is a specific law that you could call black and white, but there's always going to be different facts that affect how the law applies to it. So a lot of law school is actually learning, not a lot of it's learning what the actual law is, it's learning how facts can apply to the law. But the simplest form is it's a lot of reading. You're going to read cases and you're going to get called on randomly to answer questions about them. And then there isn't as much, at least, writing as I originally thought in law school. So I know different people might have different ideas of what they think law school is. It's not as much writing. Some classes will have papers that are due, but a lot of them, you have one midterm, which is multiple choice and an essay, and in person, multiple choice and essay, and a final, which is multiple choice and an essay. So law school, put simply, is a lot of reading.
What would you say are the real skills that make a good attorney?
Yeah, having good reading and writing skills is extremely helpful as a lawyer. But I think what's more important is creativity, thinking outside of the box, because that's a lot of the time what gets you in front of a lot of different attorneys, because you see so many of the same cases every day that it's easy to just mindlessly go through and think of it. You're punching a clock, you're checking off boxes. I've done this case before, I'm going to treat it the same way. Whereas you're motivated and you have creativity, you can find the facts that are different from your last case to get a better result for your client.
So tell me what kind of law you practice.
See, a lot of what I'll talk about when it comes to law is from my perspective, as I'm a defense attorney doing, I would say, mostly personal injury defense. But that's mostly what I do. And that's, kind of the opposite of the personal injury billboard attorneys. But my practice also includes employment, habitability, and some compliance work. And habitability is a lot of, mold and whatnot.
Okay. So is that like a decision that an attorney needs to make if you're going to be on the defense or the prosecution?
I would say people change back and forth for the most part, at least earlier in their career. Later in your career, you usually stay on one side of the aisle. So when it's either plaintiff side or defense side. There's recently at my last law firm, a couple of the attorneys that I worked for actually changed from the defense side to the plaintiff side. And that was a really big deal. So, these people that are 20, 30-year attorneys on the defense side going to the plaintiff side is not particularly normal. So I will say, yes, you kind of do choose a side, But that side, usually, you can go back and forth earlier in your career, but later in your career, you usually stay on one side.
Okay, got it. And so, David, tell everybody how long you've been an attorney.
Yeah, so I passed the bar in, so the bar is crazy. So I took the bar in July of 2021, and you don't find out the results until November. So I passed the bar in November of 2021 and then started my first job, the Monday after.
So you've been practicing for
Yeah.
5 years,
Yeah,
going on.
almost 5 years now.
Okay,
So I would say
almost
5 years in
5 years.
November.
Okay, great. So you've got your feet underneath you. You have a pretty good grasp of what you're doing. What were the early days like? Okay, so you've had 4 years of college, 3 years of law school. You've studied for the bar, which is brutal. You've passed it. Now you finally walk in and you are an attorney. So you got the JD behind your name. And what do you do on a day-to-day basis that first year?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a really scary transition because I would say, what you learn in law school are skills to be a good attorney. It doesn't teach you exactly what you're going to do in your first job. So, it's really scary and you have to ask a lot of questions. And I can maybe go through what the typical case is like. So, most of what I'm going to be explaining is from the defense side. So it's going to be defense forward. But a plaintiff will file a lawsuit. They go and trip and fall at somebody's business and they sue the business owner because of some dangerous condition that they're alleging was there that caused them to trip and fall. So they file a complaint. As a first year associate, what you usually do is you help review the complaint and see if there's anything wrong in the complaint that you either have to challenge or you file an answer and you proceed on the case. You file an answer, the next step of litigation is going through discovery. So that's basically exchanging information between the two parties through written discovery, and then you can take depositions. A lot of what you do as a first year attorney is helping prepare documents. So helping prepare the discovery responses, helping prepare the answer for another attorney to review and eventually either serve or file. And what hasn't changed this entire time is from a first year to the named partner. A lot of what the industry is deadlines. So we, especially on the defense side, we have a lot of deadlines that we're dealing with, which is through the court and through the client and internal deadlines. So a lot of what you're doing is you're getting information and you're reporting on it to the client based on their deadlines.
So circling back to what you said early on, the writing, right? Everything is very formal. Once you get a complaint that's been filed and a claim that you have to address, your communications and what you put in writing are just critically important. So a lot of reading through, making sure that things are tying up the way they need to, if not addressing it, and writing responses, documenting, looking at documents, finding documents, reviewing documents, responding to documents, and managing a timeline.
Yeah,
Would you say?
Unfortunately, yeah, it's exactly right. So it's unfortunate, not as much of your time is spent in the courtroom as a TV show would suggest. But you do get in front of a judge. I would say probably 5 to 10% of my job is doing some sort of oral advocacy.
I know enough about the process from my work in human resources. And I have to tell you that, I'm a user of legal services, right? And so I find that the best attorneys to work with from the corporate side of things are the ones that start with what is the business objective, right? What are we really trying to do? And I'm looking for from my legal counsel, right? What is the best approach? How do we do that? What risks, can we mitigate? Do we need to mitigate? Or if we're already in it, what's the best approach to take to get to the outcome that would serve the business the best?
No, definitely. And so what we're doing a lot on our side is dealing with people with personal injuries. So I can say what makes some attorneys better than others, at least in my opinion, is that exactly right. The willingness to understand the business's goals and the way that the business functions. So a lot of attorneys, you're really just dealing with somebody's injuries. You can come in, know nothing about the industry, deal with the person's injuries, and then get out. Whereas if you have a better understanding of how that business operates, who's in charge, what's involved, you are much better positioned to defend the client.
So, what do you love about what you do?
That's honestly a really good question. So it kind of keeps coming back to using this rule book to be able to creatively come up with solutions to advocate for your client. So just how I liked it in the sports compliance world, where we're using the compliance book to be able to get more athletes to come to UCLA, is the same thing here. We're all playing by the same rule book when it comes to law. The everybody has to use the same statutes in the same cases and the same facts. But it's your creativity that you can use all of those to your advantage to come up with the best outcome for you.
One is how you present it, right? Because it's one thing to have all the facts and the same information, but if you're able to put together a position around it in a more compelling way, ultimately, that's what you're trying to do, right?
And
Because
finding which facts are important. So you're going to get, you can talk to clients for hours and hours and hours about something that happened. And it's your job to figure out which facts are important to go ahead and use those facts to help your case.
Yeah. All right. What do you feel like are the skills or maybe the characteristics of a person that would find this type of work, fulfilling or interesting, or, would excel in this type of environment?
So I'll say I've met so many people, especially in law school, that have different personalities that are successful as a lawyer. So I don't want to. What I'm going to suggest are characteristics of a good attorney. Doesn't mean it's for every type of attorney, because there's so many different types. But from what I find, at least in my world, in my corner of the law, is people that like to argue. Honestly, people that are litigious do really well in my industry. I wouldn't say I'm the most litigious person, but being able to advocate for yourself and having a personality where that's loud and a little bit combative is really helpful. But it's also, again, people that really like to read and really like to write are huge advantages in this industry.
Yeah. And like you said, I think that, people that have a conviction, right, and a point of view, like if you're going to be an attorney, you have to come in with a point of view. Would you agree?
Yeah. And then it's also, so definitely coming with a point of view, but it's also being able to feel stern, and, a client's never going to want to hear bad news. So, and then you're going to be the one that has to tell it to them a lot of the time. So you have to be strong and confident in yourself to say, hey, I know you're not going to want to hear this, but this is the reality of the situation. And the quicker the client's able to learn that or realize that, the quicker you're going to be able to resolve.
That's a really, really good point, because I think that most people don't like conflict. Most people actually avoid it. Some of the things that you talked about is people that are comfortable dealing with conflict, because, just the fact that you are dealing with a claim means there's conflict. So you have to be comfortable with that you're going to take one side of the situation. And, some people can always see 3-4 sides of a situation because there are multiple sides. And yes, you can be one of those people that see all sides. However, at the end of the day, if you're going to be an attorney, you have to pick a side, right? Because you're working for a side.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to pick a side and be really focused on proving that case, or finding the information that's going to be the most compelling and telling the story in a way that's going to be the most compelling to win that case, because that's what you're being paid to do.
No, of course. But I also think part of being an advocate, again, is kind of like I said, is finding out, being good at your job isn't just finding the good facts that support your case. It's also finding the bad ones. And again, if your client did something wrong or there are bad facts, it's identifying those and not shying away from them. It's really just figuring out how those affect your case, because not every time that you're defending someone are they completely in the right. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to figure out, what's the best solution for your client based on the facts that are presented.
Right. So in a way, would you say it's almost being kind of separating your emotions, right? Like being very fact-based and direct
Yes.
and not emotional, because cases can get emotional, but you have to kind of stay very objective. Like these are the facts. So no matter,
100%.
yeah.
And the industry is very litigious. Your natural adversaries with the other side, that their job is to say that everything that you're saying is wrong. But like what you're saying, where I think that sometimes it can go over the top, is when people become emotional and have some sort of personal attacks. That's where I think things go too far. But you have to have thick skin. People are going to say that your arguments are wrong, and you have to be confident in yourself to say no, that they're actually right.
Yeah. So what I heard you say, if you're thinking about going into this type of law, because there are definitely lots of different areas of law, but if you are thinking about being, a plaintiff's attorney or a defense attorney, for example, being direct, being comfortable with conflict, being able to deliver good and bad news, being objective, being able to find kind of information that's going to be most compelling and be a good storyteller to kind of create that picture and story, and really good on the administrative side of things, right? So managing timelines, documentation, being detail oriented, and strong communication, because you've got to communicate with so many different people. You've got communication internally, you've got communication with the courts or the other attorneys, and then your clients. So have I missed anything? I feel like that's kind of what I heard from you.
No, definitely. And I think the only thing I would add is just being organized. And so, you say all of these skills, and I definitely don't have all of those. And one that I don't have and I still don't have is being 100% organized. So, all those things that you say, you don't have to be good at them. You don't have to even like them, all of those things, to still be a good attorney.
Yeah. You have to at least know your strengths and know where you need to get some help or to supplement or what have you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what advice would you give somebody if, and I'm sure you do a lot of mentoring or coaching with other young adults. So if someone comes to you and says, you know what, I really think I want to go to law school and be an attorney, what kind of advice would you give?
The best advice I'd probably give is to try to get some sort of job in a law firm. So it's something that I didn't do, or have some experience with an attorney before you decide on law school. So I think a lot of people impulsively go to law school because they don't know what they want to do. They know that it can be a good paying job, and then there's some prestige behind it. But I think before that you go to law school, I think I would tell people to stop and try to get some experience with an attorney in a law firm and try to figure out what type of law that you want to get into. I will say I didn't know what type of law I wanted to go into law school, so it's not definitely a requirement, but I think having that experience working with an attorney to have an idea of what type of law or what type of legal careers are available was extremely important before going into it.
Yeah, I do think kind of getting a realistic job preview is very, very helpful and important. I get a lot of questions from people, just general questions about grad school, right? I do a lot of work with people around their careers, and I have a PhD. So naturally, people are like, well, do you think I should get an MBA and this and that? And, the first thing I tell people is you should only get that graduate degree if it's something that you really, really, really want. And whether or not it leads to a different job or a better job or a promotion should not even be part of the equation, because it may or may not do any of those things. And it is a huge expense personally, mentally, financially, it's just a lot of time and energy. And so if you're not doing it because it's some personal, drive or motivation that is really making you want to do it, then it's not worth it. you can get a better job or a promotion or what have you, probably doing something else. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're saying as well, but it's a lot to put yourself through graduate school, not even talking about the financial commitment, just the time and energy and what it takes you away from doing, right? There's a lot of other things you could be doing in that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it's 3 years. It's a lot. So I would encourage anybody to look into it. Again, I think the most valuable thing is to get real world experience.
Okay, great. Where do you really enjoy doing?
Yeah, I think what my favorite part of the job is the oral advocacy behind it. So part of what drew me to litigation is part of litigation is having this oral advocacy that I can go in front of a judge and make oral arguments to try to convince them to find in favor of my client. Um, it's really nerve wracking arguing in front of a judge. They're pretty important people. They hold the case in the palm of their hands. So what helped me going into it is figuring out that the judge isn't there to quiz you. They're not your teacher. They're not there to grade you. They're trying to find an answer. And it's your job to help them find the answer.
Make it easy for them.
Exactly. So they're not an adversary to you. They're just trying to figure out what the law is and how to apply it correctly. So if you think of it more as a teammate rather than an adversary, it's really helped, and it's been my favorite part of the job.
Oh, yeah, that's a great way to think about it. And I do think that what you just said there in terms of making it like think about what the other person's job is and how do you make it easier for them to do their job applies in almost every career. I tell people all the time that when you work for somebody, you want to think about what is it that they're trying to achieve? Because if you can make it easier for them, then you are a huge asset to your team, your department, your function, the company, whatever. So I love how you applied that. What are some things that you don't like to do as a
So I
lawyer?
will say that the as a defense attorney, you have to bill all of your time. So that means at the end of the day, you have to put in the amount of hours you spent doing everything that day. And so it ranges from point one, which is you bill every 6 minutes. So point one is 6 minutes, and you have to account for your day. So billing is something that I do not enjoy doing, and I can get more into it if you'd like, but it's something I don't really like about the job. But and then it can be stressful. You know, a lot of people say that pressure is a privilege, which I do like. That it feels like I'm doing something meaningful, but sometimes it is a lot to handle. The constant stress from the opposing counsel and your client, because a lot of the times you're dealing with a lot of money, and it's not your money, but you get to the point where you feel like it is because you get so ingrained in the cases. Again, the pressure is a privilege. It is fun and it is interesting to have high stakes situations, but it can be stressful at the same time.
Okay, so I know that you're engaged and that pressure and being able to compartmentalize that appropriately. How do you manage that?
So I try to do a lot of active things to help with that. So I will say one thing that's very helpful is my fiance is also an attorney. A lot of our conversations are not spent talking about our cases and our work, but I think that's more purposeful that we both have stressful jobs. We don't want to come home and just talk about work. So it's nice to have that, that separation from work and home life. I also choose to go into the office every day. So I'm very fortunate that I, live about 10 minutes away from the office. But it's been so helpful that, I go into work, that's where I work, and then I come home. And obviously, sometimes my work bleeds into my home life, but I try my best to keep them separate. And then I would say the best advice that I can give anybody to help deal with stress is exercise. It's really the thing that has changed my life and the way of dealing with stress. That what helped me realize is I had a very good friend in college who he was the most social person I've ever met, had so much fun, and then after he got out of college, he was very vocal about going through some mental health troubles just because college was so much fun, and then going into the 9 to 5 was a big transition, and he turned to exercise to help with this mental health. And I would say that I used his inspiration and started exercising every morning. I go to the gym at 5:30 every morning, and it's been the best thing for me. It's helped me feel healthy, be motivated to get out of bed every day. And and it helps you want to, eat healthier. So I can't say enough good things about exercise.
Yeah, definitely movement, I think is very, very helpful. And whatever it is for anybody, if it's going to the gym, taking a quick walk, just getting outside, to the extent that you can, it is really helpful. To me, yoga is my sacred time. And when I was younger and really in the, heat of things, it was spinning. I liked that high energy type of exercise. Now it's a lot more low impact, but moving and getting out and getting it out of your system. For me, exercise helps you get some of that out of your system. Otherwise, it kind of just sits.
Yeah.
And
And you're right,
so,
it can be anything though. It could be walking for 20 minutes a day.
abs-
It can only get better. If you just start at 20 minutes a day and that's all you do, it's totally fine. And either you keep doing that, and if you keep doing it, you're probably going to want to do more. So it can be anything.
yeah, agreed 100%. Definitely the idea of going into work and keeping that there and coming home and knowing that that's your time at home to be able to rest and recover and rejuvenate and all those things is actually really important. And I do think with all of the work at home, hybrid work, that has blurred a lot of those lines. So if you do work at home, having a space where this is where I work and kind of shutting the books. Because when you work at home, it actually is so much easier to just keep working, right? Because it's right there. So creating some habits and some boundaries to put structure into your life, I think is always helpful.
Yeah, and then especially, I mean, I don't live in the biggest house, so when I would work from home, I'd be in my office and then I'd walk into the living room, which is right there. I felt like I was still at work. There was nothing that like in my brain that could switch, make me feel like, okay, now I'm off of work. So again, I go back and maybe go on a walk or try to do something that
Gives it a
draws a
clean
line in
break. Yeah,
between,
it's
yeah,
a clean
work
break.
time
Yeah,
and off of after work.
yeah, that's great. Awesome. So, what else? Any other lessons that you've learned or thoughts that you have for people that might be interested in pursuing a career in law?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is purely law, but it's something that I think we talked about a little earlier. But it's just the importance of having some sort of mentorship has really changed my career path. So I will say that going into my first job, I worked out of Orange County, but my team was in LA. So I didn't really know many of my coworkers. I had one partner in the Orange County office that started at the same time as me. So we were kind of in the same boat where we didn't really know anybody. And I started getting assigned to all of his cases. And he ended up just being the best mentor and it really pushed me to be the attorney that I am. So I was able to call him at any time, ask any questions. He was so patient with me. And it really transformed my career into what it is. It really pushed me ahead, and it made me feel comfortable as an attorney. And it showed me what being a good attorney looks like. So I think it's transferable to any industry is, looking for some sort of mentorship can really spring forward your career.
Absolutely. That actually leads me to the next set of questions that I ask all my guests. So, a couple things. One is, what's one stereotype that you've heard about young adults that are kind of in their 20s? And anything that you would like to dispel about that group of young adults?
Yeah, I think that there is starting to be this idea of, I would call it loyalty to a company. So what I see a lot of is you see a lot of employees changing jobs when they're younger. And maybe this is not even dispelling of a stereotype, but I guess it's just more empowering people that it is okay to change jobs. You don't have to feel bad. You just shouldn't feel that you're locked into the same company for 20 years. That it's okay to change jobs. And a lot of the times it's a good thing to get different experiences.
It is, definitely. What are the three most important things that you look for when you consider a job or a company or a career?
Three most. Okay. So, I mean, a lot of it's just respect. And I think probably the things I'm going to say are going to fall into the same category. I would say it's respect of your time off, communication and transparency. And then a lot of it's just the type of work that you're doing is making sure that you like that type of work.
Okay, yep, great. So, my next set of questions is all about young men. So, what do you think it means to be a man?
What it means to be a man. Okay. So I guess, what it means to be a man, I don't really fall into the idea of the stereotype of the man that has to be this, provider and protector of women. I think being a man is being confident in yourself, being strong, being smart, and being vulnerable in order to, I guess, be the best person and be the best fit for your current situation and being okay with who you are.
Great. What do you think it means to be masculine?
Again, I think being a man and being masculine, I think have a lot of the same similarities to me, and a lot of it is confidence in yourself and being who you are. That there's so many different ways of being masculine, but I think it's being a leader in your community, and again, being supportive of the people around you.
Great. How would you describe yourself?
I like to think of myself as outgoing, that I for better or for worse, am the loudest person in the room most of the time. And I really like interacting with other people. And I think that's what I've also maybe have attracted me to litigation, is you get a lot of, you're communicating with people all of the time. So I think that's my biggest strength, and the thing that I like about the most about myself is my ability to talk to people.
Great. It's always important to know what your strengths are.
Yeah.
What does supporting young men look like, in your opinion?
Okay, yeah. So supporting young men is mentorship. So I look back to the inspiration that I got from, I'll shout him out, Eric Bradley at my last job, was this partner that I worked with, that he would call me at the end of the day to go over all of the cases. Half of that was talking about our cases, and half of that was talking about our social life. So what was important was the work, but also making sure that I was mentally okay and was handling the stress of the job. So I really think it comes to mentorship.
Great. So important to have people like that in your life. What would you like to see change about the story about men?
The story I'd like to see change about men. I think a lot of people come up with this stereotype. And, I was in the fraternity at UCLA, and a lot of it is that men are super aggressive, cocky, in your face people that, I think the stereotype is that, just a stereotype. I think more people have a much more calm presence and are a lot more analytical than at least you see in movies.
Awesome. That's it, David. Those were all my questions. And I just want to thank you and thank Cy Everett again for connecting us and for your time today, sharing not only about your personal journey, but also really giving us such a great insight into what the world of being a defense attorney is really like, and providing some real life examples of what the day in the life of an attorney looks like. So thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on your engagement and your upcoming wedding.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Thanks for listening to this episode, and now it's your turn. Take what you heard today and put it into action. Share this episode with a friend who's figuring life out too. And let's build a generation of leaders who lead with heart. Follow the show, leave a review, and connect with me on social so we can keep figuring it out together. See you next time.